The FIA has just sent shockwaves through the Formula One paddock by implementing immediate rule changes targeting flexible rear wings just days before the Chinese Grand Prix.
From the Chinese Grand Prix onwards, the slot gap, as it's called, which was allowed to be 2 millimeters, will now only be allowed to be 0.5 millimeters. So,
what started as whispers in the Melbourne paddock has escalated into dramatic action that could completely reshape the competitive order in Shanghai this weekend. Teams are now scrambling to adapt their cars as the sport's governing body cracks down on the controversial mini-DRS effect that some teams have been exploiting. With Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari all potentially affected by these 11th hour changes, the question now is, whose car will suffer the most? And could this intervention hand a crucial advantage to teams who haven't been pushing the boundaries? The FIA's bombshell announcement came Monday after a thorough analysis of footage from the Australian Grand Prix, where special cameras had been monitoring rear wing behavior. Despite confirming that all teams had technically passed the previous tests in Melbourne, the governing body has decided the existing regulations weren't strict enough to prevent teams from gaining an aerodynamic advantage through flexible rear wings. Having analyzed footage from the rear wing deformations combined to the static deflections measured inside the FIA garage in Melbourne, the FIA has concluded that sufficient grounds exist for a tougher test to be introduced from the forthcoming Chinese Grand Prix. The official statement reads, "This dramatic intervention comes with virtually no notice for teams, many of whom are already in transit to Shanghai. The technical changes are significant and highly specific. Under the previous rules, teams were allowed a 2 millimeter gap between the rear wing's mainplane and flap when a 75 kilogram vertical load was applied. From this weekend's Chinese Grand Prix, that tolerance will be slashed to just 0.75 millimeters, including a temporary 0.25 millimeter allowance due to the short notice. By the Japanese Grand Prix, 2 weeks later, the permitted gap will be reduced further to just 0.5 millimeters, a quarter of what was previously allowed. This technical adjustment targets what insiders call the mini-DRS effect, where teams design rear wings that appear rigid in garage tests but flex under aerodynamic load on track. The principle is ingenious. As the car accelerates down straights, the increasing air pressure causes the wing to slightly deform, reducing drag and boosting top speed. When the car slows for corners, the wing returns to its original shape, providing maximum downforce for grip. Essentially, teams get the best of both worlds: high downforce in corners without the penalty of increased drag on straights. The controversy reached boiling point after the Australian Grand Prix, where several teams were suspected of exploiting this gray area. While the FIA confirmed all cars were technically legal under the previous tests, the footage from their monitoring cameras clearly showed wing behavior that contradicted the spirit of the regulations. For teams like Red Bull, who have historically been at the forefront of flexing bodywork innovations, these changes could be particularly problematic. Technical director Pierre Wache had publicly voiced concerns about rival teams' rear wing designs prior to Australia, suggesting that both Ferrari and McLaren were exploiting the mini-DRS effect. Now, ironically, Red Bull may find themselves needing to modify their own designs to comply with the stricter tests. McLaren, fresh from their dominant victory in Australia with Lando Norris, could also be affected. The Woking-based team had been seen testing various wing configurations during practice sessions, with some observers noting unusual flexing behavior on their rear wing. Any required modifications could potentially compromise the performance advantage they showed in Melbourne. Ferrari, already struggling with fundamental issues on their SF25, now face the additional challenge of ensuring their rear wing complies with these new regulations. For a team already battling to understand their car's erratic behavior, this added complication is the last thing they needed before heading to Shanghai. The timing of this intervention is particularly significant, coming just before Formula One returns to China for the first time since 2019. The Shanghai International Circuit, with its unique layout featuring two massive straights connected by tight corners, makes aerodynamic efficiency crucial to success, precisely the area these new tests target. Teams now face a race against time to ensure their cars comply with the new regulations before hitting the track in Shanghai. Those who have been more conservative in their wing designs may suddenly find themselves with a competitive advantage, while others could be forced into compromises that hurt their performance. Ferrari's 2025 campaign has started with a major setback that nobody saw coming, as evidence mounts that a critical gearbox issue is forcing the team to compromise their car's performance. The Maranello squad left Melbourne with far fewer points than expected, but it's what Charles Leclerc revealed in his post-qualifying interview that has opened a fascinating investigation into Ferrari's true problems. Has the much-hyped SF25 been fundamentally compromised from the start? And more importantly, can Ferrari fix this issue before their championship hopes fade away? The evidence has been hiding in plain sight since preseason testing. During the final day in Bahrain, Lewis Hamilton's running was cut short due to gearbox troubles, a sign of things to come that few paid attention to at the time. Fast forward to Melbourne, and customer team Haas saw Oliver Behrman unable to participate in qualifying due to gearbox issues, while Hamilton himself reported gear synchronization problems over team radio during the race. But the smoking gun came directly from Leclerc, who admitted the team had to raise the ride height of both SF25s between Friday practice and Saturday qualifying. This is a crucial detail. Teams would never voluntarily sacrifice performance by raising ride height unless absolutely necessary, and the telemetry data confirms just how much performance they lost as a result. If you look at Leclerc's data from FP2 compared to his final Q3 lap, the performance drop is shocking, an F1 analyst commented. He was significantly slower in the final 4 corners of the circuit despite running with less fuel in qualifying. In turn 11 alone, he lost 8 kilometers per hour and almost 1 G of cornering force. That's an enormous amount of performance sacrificed. The picture emerging suggests that Ferrari's gearbox is experiencing excessive stress when the car runs at the optimal ride height. When the SF25 gets too close to the ground, exactly where you want it for maximum downforce, it appears the gearbox is being damaged by impacts with the track surface. This forced Ferrari into the compromise of raising both cars for qualifying and the race, explaining their mysterious loss of pace after looking so competitive on Friday. This creates a devastating dilemma for the Italian team. The SF25 appears to have genuine pace when run at its intended ride height, but doing so risks catastrophic gearbox failures. Yet by raising the ride height to protect the gearbox, they're sacrificing the downforce needed to challenge McLaren at the front. The big question now is whether Ferrari can solve this problem without completely redesigning their gearbox, which would effectively end their championship hopes before they've even begun. Designing and manufacturing a new gearbox would take months, eating into their limited resources under the budget caps. More likely, Ferrari will need to explore alternative solutions. They could modify suspension settings to soften the ride over bumps and curbs, potentially allowing them to run the car lower without transmitting as much shock to the gearbox. However, this approach brings its own compromises to mechanical grip and handling balance. China and Japan will provide critical data points to confirm this theory. If we see Ferrari look quick on Fridays before mysteriously losing pace for qualifying again at both venues, it will confirm the team is facing a fundamental design issue rather than a Melbourne-specific anomaly. For Ferrari and their millions of passionate fans, the situation is intensely frustrating. The SF25 appears to have the raw pace to fight at the front, especially with the stellar driver lineup of Leclerc and Hamilton. But this technical limitation could derail their entire season before it's even properly begun. What do you think about Ferrari's gearbox troubles? Can they find a workaround solution, or are they facing a season-long compromise? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Excuse us, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Lewis Hamilton has left the entire paddock speechless with his mindset heading into his Ferrari debut, confirming exactly what rival drivers feared most. The 7-time world champion feels absolutely zero outside pressure. Despite concerns about adapting to a new team at 40 years old, Hamilton has arrived in Melbourne with a dangerous combination of confidence, experience, and pure excitement that has sent shockwaves through the grid. The question now isn't whether Hamilton can handle the pressure of Ferrari, it's whether anyone can handle the pressure of racing against a liberated Lewis Hamilton. After 12 seasons with Mercedes that ended with 3 frustrating years in an underperforming car, many wondered if Hamilton's move to Ferrari would bring overwhelming pressure and expectations. But the Briton has flipped the script entirely, declaring that external pressure is non-existent for him ahead of this weekend's Australian Grand Prix. This mental fortitude is precisely what competitors hoped they wouldn't see from a rejuvenated Hamilton in the famous red car. I'm under no assumptions that it will be easy. It is not.
It's been a long winter, but it's also been very short. But I'm really grateful we had good testing last week. I can't believe the race is already next week, so I already start to make my venture to Australia on Friday. So that's when it really starts to be, it will start to sink in a little bit as the weekend kind of arrives, this weekend before. And no, but I feel excited. I feel we're as best prepared as we could be given the short space of time that I've had. There's still things to learn, but I'm just excited to get going. I love racing.
Hamilton acknowledged when speaking to media in Melbourne, but I don't feel the pressure. The outside pressure, it's non-existent for me. The pressure is from within and what I want to achieve. These aren't the words of a driver feeling the weight of Ferrari's championship drought. They're the words of a champion who knows exactly what he's capable of delivering. What's particularly alarming for rivals is Hamilton's clear sense of purpose and belonging at Ferrari. I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. I don't feel I have to do anything, he stated with the confidence that comes from having nothing left to prove in the sport. I've been in F1 a long time and done it time and time again. I know what it takes to do a good job, and that's what I want to deliver for myself and for my family, for this team that I really believe deserves success. Ferrari hasn't won a driver's championship since 2007 or a constructor's title since 2008, but they finished second in the constructor's standings last season and ended 2024 with one of the most competitive cars on the grid. With Hamilton now at the wheel alongside Charles Leclerc, the Scuderia has assembled a driver lineup that rivals will be losing sleep over. The transformation in Hamilton is palpable. After struggling with a difficult Mercedes for 3 seasons, he arrived in Melbourne visibly energized and motivated. "I'm itching to get going," he said, his enthusiasm unmistakable. "This is the most exciting period of my life, and so I'm really just enjoying it. I'm so excited to get in the car tomorrow." Perhaps most intimidating for competitors is Hamilton's emotional and psychological evolution since his F1 debut at this very track in 2007. The contrast between the 22-year-old rookie who drowned many times and today's self-assured champion couldn't be more stark. Now, obviously, I'm very comfortable in my skin. I know who I am, I know where I'm going, I know what energy and time and effort I need to put in to get there, Hamilton reflected. This level of self-knowledge combined with his unparalleled experience makes Hamilton more dangerous than ever. He's not only technically brilliant, but mentally bulletproof. The exact combination that drivers like Verstappen and Norris desperately hoped they wouldn't have to contend with in a competitive Ferrari.
I can't believe the race is already next week, so I already start to make my venture to Australia on Friday. So that's when it really starts to be, it will start to sink in a little bit as the weekend kind of arrives. I feel we're as best prepared as we could be given the short space of time that I've had. There's still things to learn, but I'm just excited to get going. I love racing, and so all the other stuff is stuff I love less. Racing is what I love. Being at Melbourne, it's going to be very reminiscent of my first Grand Prix there.
The moment that shook Formula One to its core is finally upon us this weekend, as Lewis Hamilton prepares to make his competitive Ferrari debut at the Australian Grand Prix. After more than a year of anticipation following the bombshell announcement in February 2024, the 7-time world champion will finally sport the iconic red overalls in front of a packed Melbourne crowd. With testing showing mixed signals about Ferrari's true pace and Hamilton's adaptation to the SF25, the big question remains: can the most successful driver of the modern era challenge for that record-breaking 8th title with the prancing horse? Or is McLaren's strong preseason form about to rain on Ferrari's parade from the very first race?
We are going to come into what happened at testing, but we're already hearing that he doesn't feel like it's going to take him half a season to get up to speed. He is right there right now. He trusts the braking on this Ferrari, and we know when Hamilton trusts his brakes and can attack a corner as he wants, and perhaps he hasn't been able to do in that Mercedes for the last couple of years, he's at his most dangerous.
Yeah, I think, he's already sounds more confident. Everything we see of him, see him in red, walking in the paddock, he's loving it. But when we see testing with him, he was really on it. He had a few, not spins, but a few off curbs, let's say, through the test. And then by the last day, he was really on it, really confident in that car. I think he truly believes that he's going to win in this car. And that's going to be very powerful, Lewis, when we get to race 1.
There is no question that Hamilton's move has generated unprecedented excitement around Formula One. The sport's most decorated active driver joining its most iconic team creates a marriage made in motorsport heaven, and the Melbourne race organizers couldn't be happier about hosting this historic debut. Ticket sales have reportedly skyrocketed, and the atmosphere at Albert Park is expected to be electric, with Ferrari fans welcoming their new star and Hamilton's loyal supporters following him to his new team. The journey to this point has been nothing short of spectacular.